Hello and welcome to Home Media Minefield Presents Let's See What's Out There, a weekly video stream and podcast currently focused on Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, which is available to watch on Paramount+. My name's Keith Isles, and as ever on this stream, I am joined by
Pete Mealy.
And we are both film and television enthusiasts. And in today's episode, we are going to have a spoiler-filled conversation around episode 7 of season 2, entitled Those Old Scientists. So this is the big crossover episode that was actually dropped early. So at the time of recording this, a further episode 8 has just dropped on Paramount+. I'll be honest, me and Pete, I don't think either of us have watched it yet. It's actually going to be my reward for finishing today's stream. So we will be having a spoiler-filled conversation, however, about everything up to and including episode 7, Those Old Scientists. As I said, that was dropped because it got screened early at Comic-Con. So we ended up getting 2 episodes last week instead of the weekly ones, if that makes sense. So if you're new here, welcome. If you find this in any way entertaining or informative and like this, please do consider giving us a like, hitting that thumbs up button, subscribing to the channel. We're currently at about the 700 or so subscribers mark, and if we could get to that 1,000 subscribers, that would really help out. And if you hit the bell icon, you'll get notified as and when new content drops. It's not just reviews of Star Trek here. We talk about many other film and television franchises, as well as things such as physical media, that sort of stuff. So please do check that out. We would really appreciate it. And likewise, if you're listening on a podcast, if you're listening on the audio, please do consider giving us a review and a like on whatever podcatcher you're on. So hopefully that makes sense. So Pete, I feel like we have a lot to talk about today. Do you?
Is this going to be an animated discussion? I'm sorry. I'm going to make that joke numerous times.
I love it. I love it. And our credits today, obviously the credits for this are partly animated anyway, but I couldn't appear in animation, which would be sad because I wish I could, because my eyes would be a lot bigger. But but yeah, we have a sort of loose and fun format that we try and stick to here. So we have a brief episode summary. We talk about some of the behind the scenes production credits, have a bit of fun looking at Easter eggs and connections and references, of which we could probably spend the entire show trying to do that for this one. We look at any speculation as to where we think the series might be going. And then we really get into our thoughts and nitpicks and really break down the episode and end up by giving it a rank rating, which is hard to say sometimes. So, but with that, let's get straight into it. And Pete, hit it.
We start with a lower deck scene. Our animated ensigns are exploring an ancient portal originally discovered by Pike or the Orions, depending on who you ask. When they accidentally activate it, and Ensign Boimler gets live actioned into our Strange New Worlds episode. Boimler is a giddy goody two-shoes who revels in the experience of spending time with these titans of history. Spock's not exactly what he expected, so Boimler talks with Chapel, and now the cat's out of the bag that Spock is a historical figure, but Chapel is not, so that's a hard reality check. As they work on getting Boimler home, Orions show up and steal the portal. Boimler helps them track down the Orions. They get the portal back and set it up just in time for Ensign Mariner to travel back in time. And this is another fine mess they've gotten themselves into. Mariner and Uhura work together, kind of, and Spock and Boimler work together, kind of, and eventually Pike asks the animated ensigns to stop. Just stop. Which is when they figure out the solution and are able to make tentative peace with the Orions, send the lower decks crew back to their universe, and teach the Enterprise crew how to let go of reality and live an animated existence. The effects of this we'll just have to see about next time.
I love the way you do these, Pete. Very good, very good. Question is, do you think the remainder, there's a speculation question, is the remainder of the show going to exist in animation?
Yeah.
There'll be a way of saving some budget. Well, some budget and then creating budget in other areas. But that's a whole thing that happens behind the scenes. And talking of behind the scenes, it's time to make it so. So looking at this week's production credits, this episode was directed by Jonathan Frakes. You may have heard of Jonathan Frakes. I don't think I really need to go into his filmography because anybody watching a podcast or listening to a podcast like this will indeed know of Jonathan Frakes' work. So I'll move on from that, but good job, Jonathan Frakes. In terms of writing, this week's episode gets a co-writing credit from Catherine Lynn and Bill Wolkoff. We've spoken about Catherine on a previous episode of this because she got credited for one of those. But looking at Bill's filmography, his writing credits, they extend back to the late 90s, where he wrote an episode of The Closer TV series. He's also been involved in G.I. Joe Renegades TV series, Tron Uprising. He was a staff writer on that, so some animated series there. Also Star Wars Rebels, sticking within the animated area, done 3 episodes of that. Once Upon a Time, he was story editor and staff writer on that show. The Man Who Fell to Earth TV series, he wrote an episode of, and this is actually the 3rd writing credit of Strange New Worlds. He did 2 episodes of season 1, which obviously we didn't cover and break down in the same way as we are for this show. So there are his writing credits. I do also need to mention that, of course, Mike McMahon, who created Star Trek Lower Decks, is kind of obviously partly to credit here as well. Now, obviously, as well as our regular cast and crew, we've got some special guest stars in this episode, which, of course, are actors that normally voice characters within Strange New World. Lower Decks, not Strange New Worlds, and Strange New Worlds now, but Lower Decks. But looking at some of the extended cast, I wanted to mention actor Greg Brick, I think that's how that's pronounced, who played Captain Karras, the Orion science ship captain in this episode. So looking at his credits, he's a Canadian actor, both film and television, number of credits over the years, but best known for recurring roles in Regenesis, which ran from 2004 to 2008, 13, the series, which ran from 2011 to 2012, Bitten from 2014 to 2016, and Frontier, that ran from 2016 to 2018. More recently, some of the credits also include the likes of, well, I say more recently, Nikita was some time back now, but also The Expanse, Ransom, The Handmaid's Tale, the Wilds, The Lost Symbol, and Titans. So quite a eclectic and decent bunch of credits there, but an actor that's probably not pointed out that often. So I thought I'd give him a mention on this one.
Nice.
There you go, Pete, because I think it would get too bogged down if we tried talking about the guest stars, which we will talk about when we break this episode down, but the guest stars from Lower Decks. If anybody is interested, we did actually record a few Lower Decks podcasts when the series first started. So that is back in the archive of our podcast. So if you want to find out our thoughts, some of which I'm sure will come out today, but please do check that out. So I've been doing a lot of talking, Pete. Do you think it's time we have a drink?
Yes, let's.
Let's have some tea, Earl Grey, hot. All right, Pete, it's Easter egg time, which one could say this entire show was one big Easter egg.
There's, yeah.
But, any that you want to flag first?
So if you're not familiar with Lower Decks, the opening credits for Strange New Worlds this time were a, what's the right word? Melange of Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks sort of combined, right? And
Yep.
So there was that. There is quite a bit of talk about Admiral Archer and the NX-01 from the Enterprise series. That's fun. They mentioned Spock's Sellout, which was a animated series episode, so that's cool. Yeah, those are the ones that I wrote down.
Cool. All right. Yeah, no
I'm
problem.
sure there's more.
I think there are lots here. I mean, obviously, the title itself, Those Old Scientists, which is how, you know, in the next gen era within Lower Decks, you know, they refer to this time period, but also that is kind of a little in reference joke, because obviously that's TOS, which all Star Trek fans know is for the original series. So yeah, that was quite good. But yes, so having a quick look at the slide here, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not, I'll talk through this as well. So I noticed they used Rutherford used a hollow camera to take the picture of Boimler, which obviously ends up triggering the portal. I think that camera is the same as what the holographic Doctor used to have in Star Trek Voyager. It looked very much like it was based on the same prop. So managed to find a picture of Picardo there holding the hollow camera. We also always talk about not only references to other Star Trek, but references to other films and TV shows. And I don't know whether you felt this, Pete, but I was getting a real Stargate vibe off of the portal, particularly the bit when he looked back at them before actually sort of going into the portal. So I got a bit of a Stargate vibe there. So different franchise, but I thought it looked a bit similar. The other thing, and forgive me, I'm sure this is on like Memory Alpha or one of the Trek sites, so people will probably be screaming. I don't know the name of the alien, the name of the creature, but one of the things I did notice in the beginning credits, as you mentioned, they kind of do the normal Strange New World credits, but in animated, you know, cartoon style, and we got one of the creatures that appears in the credits of Lower Decks, sort of sucking on the nacelle of the Enterprise. So I noticed that there. What else? They mentioned things like the museum, which of course was we saw in the last episode or the last season, should I say, of Star Trek Picard. So that was cool. We get well, there's lots of things like we have they make a comment about the communicator badges that they have in the 24th century, and you know, Pike says something that I've always thought is, you know, the flip is the best part kind of thing, and all of that stuff. They also make reference to 5-digit star dates, again, sort of to line up with what the original era did in relation to the next gen era, as it were. We get a name drop for Worf at one point where he says Worf's honor, and then you know, we get, oh yes, I've got a picture. I'm not sure if it really shows there, but bottom right, I've got obviously Jonathan Frakes bought a lot of things to the character of Riker over the years, and one of the things was what they called the Riker maneuver, and it's where, you know, Frakes, being pretty tall, used to sort of flip his leg over chairs and all of this sort of thing. And there's a point where Boimler gets on Pike's saddle and he says Riker as he sort of gets onto it. So obviously, you know, Frakes himself directing this episode's a little bit of self-referencing there, but nothing wrong with that. You correctly mentioned Spock's pet. Was it Salat? Is that how it's pronounced? That was obviously mentioned in Journey to Babel, but was also actually seen in the animated series, the excellent episode Yesteryear, where you see an old Spock go through the Guardian of Forever to meet a young Spock, and we indeed see his beloved pet in that. So that was cool. There's things like mentions of ranks on the sleeves as opposed to the pips and everything, what they would normally have. Also, I noticed that, and I'm not sure if this is actually correct or not, but I noticed Uhura on her pad was studying Bajoran and Cardassian languages, which is obviously something we don't get to until the next generation era. But I guess they were aware of those, you know, those races, alien races, 100 years prior to all of that stuff, I guess. But I did notice it in there. What else? Oh, yes, I've got another slide. It's all right. I thought there was more stuff. I did 2 slides today for this. So, yeah, we get the mention. He says, "Holy Q," and he gets told that they're having a problem. They've got a Trelane issue going on in this period, which is quite a funny little reference, because obviously they don't meet Q until the pilot of the Next Generation encounter at Farpoint. But there has been many a fan speculation that Trelane from the original series was actually part of the Q continuum. Don't know whether that's the case. I think it was called, what was the name of that episode? The Squire of Gothos, I believe.
Yeah.
The original era episode that had that. We get, obviously, Pike mentions his future in a scene that I'm sure we'll talk about later, but obviously referring to the fact that he knows his future and he knows he's going to end up in that chair. We get loads of, which I'm sure you loved, Pete, we get loads of Star Trek Enterprise shout outs. We get the mention of the NX-01, which of course is the thing that sort of solves the whole problem of this entire episode, having a piece of the NX-01 built within the Enterprise 1701. So that was kind of cool. There are shout outs. There's things about grapplers. There are shout outs to Travis Mayweather and Hoshi Sato, which again leads me to always say, I keep saying this, but I think I really do feel that Navia, sorry, that's the actress, Ortegas, sorry, Erica Ortegas's uniform is the wrong color, because again, Mayweather had gold, as did Sulu, who follows. But I guess they thought Melissa Navia looks better in red. Again, but that's something that always bothers me still. There's also mention about which did amuse me somewhat, where they were sort of saying about stuck in a dystopian San Francisco in the middle of a riot, and they say how that's a very specific reference. Right. Well, I believe that is a reference to an episode we've talked about a lot of DS9, which is a 2-parter called Past Tense. So we had that. Again, we sometimes mention how things reference other movies and other things that aren't necessarily Star Trek. And I believe that the quote that Pellier gives Boimler as advice is actually a Cary Grant quote about, "I always pretended to be someone I wanted to be until finally I became that someone," or "he became me." Cary Grant, obviously very famous for a lot of his quotes. And I suppose it's possible, if the character of Pellier is indeed, thousands of years old. She might have even met Cary Grant. Who knows, right? So I thought that was fun. And then I've got
wait, quick correction.
Oh,
she met Arthur Treacle.
Okay, yes, fair enough. Very
Did
good.
I say that one right? I don't know if I got that one right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then a obviously another reference there is which I thought was quite funny is the whole joke that goes through this about numero una as he called a number one being a pin-up and whatever. I mean, first of all, there's a little joke in there that, of course, prior to getting roles in films like the X-Men and whatever, Rebecca Romaine was a model and was obviously photographed and put on posters quite often. But it also links to a previous episode with the ad astra per aspera quote, and being, promoting that. Obviously, it's quite touching for Una, I guess, as that was something that she'd always lived by. And then the other thing, when the is it Captain Ransom? I'm not really sure of the name. Yeah, is it Commander Ransom, the first officer in Lower Decks? Says about being the hottest officer in Starfleet. There's kind of a meta joke there because, of course, that character is voiced by Jerry O'Connell, who is married to Rebecca Romaine in real life. So it's completely okay for him to say something like that. But that's it. I'm sure there are many others, but those are the ones that I kind of managed to pull out and grab and put on a slide there. So yeah, or a couple of slides today.
Archibald Leach. I got his name wrong. Sorry.
Oh, right. Sorry. I didn't spot that.
I was trying to, Cary Grant's real name, Archibald Leach.
Right. Yes. There you go. Yes.
Quite a bit.
After all that, are you seeing anything, Pete?
Yeah, I'm seeing 4 stars. No, it's 4 lights.
Sorry about that. I triggered the wrong bumper, but there you go. So 4 lights. So speculation. Any for you, Pete? I don't know.
I actually really liked one thing here, which is how they sort of, I think, are going to end the Spock and Chapel storyline, right? And they do it it's like a very comedic setting, but I think that it has very real world and dramatic implications. And so I think that's going to come back, right? Like, I think this episode is going to be impactful in that way. That's what I'm willing to say as a prediction.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, all I've got, and this is a slide I've shown before, basically there's a lot of mention all the time about the Klingon War. They mention it again about how Ortegas is actually a war hero from the Klingon War. And I just wonder whether we are going to go back to that at some point. It was obviously the thing that sort of happened during Star Trek Discovery, but the crew of that, including Captain Pike, sort of jumped over those events by going into the mirror universe, which still think was a bloody stupid idea, but there you go. So I wonder if it's something that they realize, we kind of missed a trick there. We should go back to that at some point, because it's also been mentioned by Mbenga and Chapel and quite a few people. So I don't know whether that's something that maybe next season or something they might be setting up, but it was a thought I had.
And then I do know a little bit of a spoiler from looking at social media.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
As you know, I try and I try and avoid that stuff. But fair enough. Well, do you feel it's time to draw a line then?
Yes, let's draw a line.
Okay. So this is where we really get into it and talk about our thoughts and feelings and nitpicks and everything about this episode before we go in, rank it. But yes, Pete, you go for it.
So, well, no, because here's what I want to say is that I know like every week I go first, but I feel like you should go first this week.
Really? Okay. I just feel like I do too much talking. That's what worries me.
Well, I don't think you do. And I think that you have previously said that you don't overly enjoy the comedic episodes of Star Trek.
Yep.
And there's no two buts about it that this was purely a comedic episode.
You're right. It was. You are absolutely right. Okay. Well, all right. Let's break it down then. I'm going to begin by saying that. Yeah. Okay. So I'm somewhat torn, which isn't the first time on these. It isn't the first time when we're talking about this season of Strange New Worlds, because it's no secret that I could not. Again, I'm going to recap slightly here. So sorry, I'm sort of trudging old ground here a little bit. But for any of you that heard our, commentaries on Lower Decks, it's no secret that I was not a fan of this show at all. I realized it wasn't for me. I really couldn't accept it as canon. I thought, which of course this episode is completely destroyed now, I had my own headcanon thing where I thought it was an ironic adult animated, comedy series that was designed for officers to watch between shifts and whatever, and that was the only way it made any sense, and it referenced, people from Trek history and all of this sort of thing. It was, because I simply could not accept that Starfleet officers, regardless of what rank they were and what purpose they served on a starship, would just behave like this, that they would be so childish and irresponsible, and also I really had a problem with the whole it felt like a parody show, because there was so many references and member berries, but it was all done in a very 21st century Gen Z vernacular, with people talking, in a way I just didn't believe. And Boimler was just made to look like a complete buffoon all of the time, usually ending up in some embarrassing situation with no clothes on, where Beckett, Mariner, was a know-it-all at everything and just showed him up and made him look like an idiot. And I don't know. I mean, I think we got more than halfway through the first season and then decided it wasn't for us and never covered anymore. And I've never gone back to it. I think there's been maybe 2 more seasons since. So even though I'm aware
they're in their 4th season.
Is it the 4th season now? So yeah, so I never went back to it.
I don't know.
It's also fair to say that in terms of Star Trek, there are many different types of Star Trek episodes. There always has been, ever since the 1960s when it began. So you have comedy, humorous episodes, you have deep sci-fi episodes, you have action episodes, space battle episodes, time travel episodes, you name it. You have all these different things, and there's always been light episodes. And one of the things I thought of in terms of crossovers and light episodes was, for the 30th anniversary of Star Trek, which makes me feel ancient when I say this, they had a Deep Space Nine episode called Trials and Tribulations, which mixed Deep Space Nine with the original series, and again, it was a time travel type thing, and it was filled with references and Easter eggs, and was bloody entertaining. Frankly, even though it's a silly episode. So, okay, and before I go into it, one more thing I'll say is, I say this a lot when we've basically covered new Trek since we started this show. So we started it in when Star Trek Picard came out,
season 1.
Yeah. Hence the name of the show. Let's see what's out there. And there's been many a time when I've actually said, and this kind of goes back to my feelings with Star Trek Into Darkness, where, because I enjoyed Star Trek 2009 as much, I wanted to love Star Trek Into Darkness, but just couldn't and didn't. There's been shows, whether it's been Discovery, Lower Decks, first couple of seasons of Picard, where I want to love it because it's Star Trek, but I just don't. But I'm almost thinking, and I will get to a point here, I promise, but the flip side, I actually feel like I went into this episode wanting to actually dislike it, because I thought, I don't like the idea of this silly Lower Decks being mixed with Strange New Worlds, which I really like. And I went in kind of probably wanting to hate it, but the truth of the matter is, I didn't. I actually had quite a good time watching this episode. And I have to say that it's the only episode of season 2 so far that I've watched more than once. Partly because I wanted to go back and get some more of the Easter eggs, but I didn't mind watching it again. So I am actually quite surprised at my my feelings towards this, because I think Jonathan Frakes is a great director. I've got no problem with that. But in terms of the writing and in terms of mixing these two things of humor together and whatever, I thought I was really going to hate it. And I've obviously got nitpicks, which we'll go through. But in terms of a piece of entertainment, whether I want to believe it's canon or not, I actually quite enjoyed it. I'm almost embarrassed to say. So that's me. We'll get into breaking more of it, but I've talked a lot. I want to hear from you, Pete.
So, we do not talk about our feelings before. And so I wanted you to go first, because I figured you were going to crap all over this, so that then I could say, in contrast, I loved it. Right. And yet here we are.
Well, I won't go as far as to say I loved it, Pete. That's a long way, but okay. But I certainly, I was ready to give this a really hard time.
Yeah.
But objectively, whereas I may have problems with certain things, objectively, I actually quite enjoyed the episode.
I was ready for this to
we haven't agreed on a lot this season, have we?
No. And I think I'm in the exact same place. I went in expecting a disaster, right? So I went in maybe like this, right? Like, oh God, this is going to be, right? I'm shielding myself from the blast. And instead, I was like, this is good. Like, it's fine. I got a lot of vibes of, there's a Next Gen episode where someone pretends to be a traveler from the future. Do you remember that one?
Yes. Is that Future Imperfect?
I'm not going to know the name.
Okay. I think so. But yeah, I think that's the one. But yes.
But it's got that actor in it who was in like Eureka and a bunch of stuff, and yada yada yada. Long story short, he claims to be from the future. He's just a con man who stole a ship from the future. And
oh no, I don't. No, actually, I don't think that's the same episode. Sorry, but yes, okay.
Anyway, it's it felt a lot like that to me. No, it's not Future Imperfect.
No, sorry. No.
Yeah. Anyway, so Traveler, whatever.
Don't worry.
Um,
People will be
anyway,
screaming at
so
their screens.
A Matter of Time. A Matter of
Okay.
Time.
Okay.
Maybe. Anyway, so yeah, A Matter of Time. So anyway, it's I felt like this was an episode very much akin to that episode, right? Where some of the comedy is in the future versus the present, and quote unquote present. Um and and so it just worked for me, like I was not expecting the mashup of the series to work, and it worked. And so I've been trying to like wrap my head around that. I think
Yep.
it does sort of tie into something we talked about last week,
Yes.
where you mentioned the type of dialogue is very modern in Strange New Worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't always work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Here, the lower decks characters actually call out,
They
like,
do.
they talk so slow here. I don't
Yeah.
understand that, right?
They
And that's
and
because,
quietly. They say
yeah.
they talk so slow and quietly.
And
They
like that
call it
was
out.
very funny to me.
Yeah.
But then it made me like really think about it, and I think, it is very different dialogue and very different acting, than Discovery, TNG, TOS, DS9. But Strange New Worlds sort of uh, has its own sort of milieu, right? I don't want to I'm trying to find the right words. Anyway, it has its own sort of ethos and like way of being, and Discovery is very different, but they're still both very modern.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I think this was maybe more successful than a Lower Decks TNG or Lower Decks Picard crossover would have been, because their like dialogue would have been too jarring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because Strange New Worlds has sort of started to get us accustomed
Mm-hmm.
to a more colloquial 21st century dialogue, that then this really worked. It like
Mm-hmm.
heightened it to the next level, but it was still in the same sort of tempo, or whatever, to really cross metaphors. And so, yeah, I don't know. I was struck by how much it worked well, and how I feel like they used Lower Decks to maybe start righting the ship on some of these things that
Mm. Yes.
Strange New Worlds has been doing that I don't really love,
Yeah.
right? Or like,
Who would have thought that Lower Decks could potentially save where Strange
right?
New Worlds is going wrong? I mean, yeah.
It's
That's
mind blowing,
that's mind blowing. Yeah. No,
mind blowing.
absolutely. Now, I felt the same. I mean, it's one of the things. So obviously, we were wondering how they were going to do this, because on paper this should not have worked at all, right?
At
We're like,
all.
how are they going to go from an animated series that's set 120 years, ahead of Strange New Worlds? How are they going to? I mean, the whole animation live action thing, they kind of covered that at the bookends. So at the first thing, he goes, "Oh wow, you guys look very realistic," or whatever, and
Yeah.
then dropped it. And then at the end, when they're drinking the drink, it's obviously, they're all animated, and it's like as if it's sort of a hallucinogenic result of the alcohol or whatever, and they reference the big eyes and all of that stuff. So again, kind of silly, but they got that out of the way. The time travel MacGuffin, I mean, there was no real sort of science behind any of that, but we've had that before, portals and
Yeah.
and all of that nonsense. So that was fine. some interesting things that I thought about while I was watching it. It was like, firstly, I find it quite interesting, and I wondered whether it was by intent or not. But obviously, often in animation, the voice casting that is done in animation doesn't necessarily match the likeness of the characters being animated. And it's funny because I've just heard James Gunn, I won't go too off topic here, but James Gunn, who has taken over the DC universe, one of the things that he is purposely doing is he's got some animated shows in the works, and he is casting actors that to voice the characters that also look like the characters. So if they do have a live action version, it can be the same actor doing the voice and playing the physical character. And I thought that was quite interesting with this, that apart from, okay, they had to, dye Jack Quaid's hair purple or whatever, and obviously put them in the uniforms. But other than that, they kind of totally fit the likeness of the animated characters that they're playing, which I thought was quite funny. The other thing that made me laugh was how tall they actually were. And I thought to myself, it kind of makes sense, I suppose, because, they say each generation gets taller. Well, I suppose 122 years in the future, it's not, because they made all of the Strange New World cast look quite short, I thought, in comparison. I don't know whether you noticed that, but it was something that really jumped out to me. Well, obviously we get the uniforms thing always drives me mad, but one little detail that I did really like, and it's quite funny because when Mariner comes through, they're always sort of talking in the background. Well, one of the things you hear her say is, rank on the sleeves. I'm not sure about that and all of this. But even to the point where she wears her uniform with the sleeves rolled up, just like the character does in the animation and stuff. And so little things like that I actually thought were quite good. But yeah, it was interesting how they were kind of the likeness of the thing. The other thing which you've kind of touched on here is the fact that, bizarrely, because obviously, these shows were written and produced before any fan reaction, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking of the turnaround of these type of shows. But what is interesting is there is almost like a meta commentary going on here, because some of the problems we've been saying about Spock this season, it's interesting that the Boimler character actually head-on addresses that. It's almost like Boimler, for all his buffoonery, was kind of the voice of the Star Trek, the hardcore Star Trek fans. Do you know what I mean? Because he had a problem that Spock, his hero, was not how he imagined him to be. And I wasn't sure about some of the cheesy grinning from Ethan Peck, but yeah, that was it. But then again,
it was weird.
If I was with Nurse Chapel, I'd probably be smiling too. But anyway, but and like you rightly said, maybe this is a way of them almost retconning that problem that they're writing themselves into with the Chapel Spock relationship and all of this sort of thing. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting on how quite a lot of it was a bit of a meta commentary on what fans are saying about Spock and how Ethan Peck's Spock is very different to the Nimoy Spock that we go on to know from the series and movies. So I thought that was interesting. Sorry, before I rabbit on any further, do you want to comment on any of that? Sorry.
No, I'm agreeing. I agree with all of it. Yeah.
The other thing that I did, oh God, I did like, as you know, I've got a bit of a man crush on Pike, but I did like the fact that they pointed out that not only all of his how important he is as a figure and as a hero and as an inspiration and all this, but his wonderful hair, which is great. And it did make me laugh when he finds out that Boimler dressed up as, you know, in fancy dress as Pike, and she said, "Oh yeah, we had to do lots of contouring to that jawline." That actually did make me actually laugh out loud, which I thought was quite funny. But it led into a scene which, for all the humor and stupidness, I actually found a fairly moving scene, and I liked it because it expanded a little bit on the Pike character, and that was where, you know, they bring up the future and the fact that he knows it, you know, which is something they've had to lean into because of what they did in Discovery with the time crystal and all of that stuff. But I do like the fact they've kind of embraced this in this show. But he then tells a story about his father and how this year he is a year older than his father would have been. And that really reminded me actually of a scene in Star Trek Beyond, the third movie, with Chris Pine and oh God, his name's gone
Zachary
completely.
Quino?
No, Bones.
Carl Urban.
Carl Urban. Yeah, God, I can't believe I blanked there. But a scene where they're talking and it's Kirk's birthday, and he said it's the first year that he's older than George Kirk in that timeline than his father, you know, and then they toast. And I love the toast. What is it? To perfect eyesight and a full head of hair. But that kind of reminded me of that, you know, with Pike bringing up that he's actually outlived his father, even though he knows what his future is going to be. And obviously not that he's going to die, but that he's going to end up
have a difficult future.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I thought that, you know, for lack of a better term, right, the B plots in this episode were more engaging and more worthwhile than the A plot of having to get everyone home. You know, and I'm calling the B plots the Pike birthday relationship, the Chapel Spock relationship, and to a little extent, you know, the Uhura work ethic storyline, right? Like, I found those, more interesting than the you know, the MacGuffin, if you will, of like time travel, right? Which is obviously like the A plot that they're working through. But yeah.
And I also like that I like the Orion angle as well, with it being the, you know, in the future where they come from, Orions are serving on starships, but in the past, everybody's assuming that, you know, Orions are pirates and the women are, you know, slave girls or whatever, like was set, you know, in the 60s or whatever with that. And so I thought that was quite an interesting way of handling that as well, which made a lot of sense. The other thing I did like is the things that you and I have found annoying about the Lower Decks characters. The characters in Strange New Worlds found annoying about them, which I liked, because honestly, you know that is the thing, that the way Boimler and Mariner behave, you know, that's always been my problem, is how on earth can that be taken seriously or put up with by Starfleet, you know? and they do sort of address it. I did like when Boimler first walks on the bridge, it's almost as if a fan would walk on to you know the set of Star Trek Continues or something, you know, and be like, oh wow, you know. And I like the way Pike said to him, Mr. Boimler, stand right here, because he started going towards his chair and stuff. But yeah, there was actually a lot of stuff I did like here, actually. And I expected to be so annoyed by this. I expected to be really, really down on it. And, you know, I try and be fair and objective with my criticism of stuff. And whereas on one hand, I'll say it's not beyond criticism by any point, at the same time, I would be lying if I didn't say I found it entertaining and amusing.
Well, if we had to put your heart on a sleeve,
have you got anything you want to add? Anything you want to? Not at all. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nailed it.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot in this episode. I thought we'd have a very long episode today. I don't know why, but I thought it was mainly more because I thought you were going to disagree with me.
Yeah, 100%. Thought you were going to disagree.
That's so funny. I thought you were going to hate it. You thought I
thought you were going to hate it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, where are you on this ranking this week?
So I do really, like one of the things we talked about is that there is stuff to pull apart in this episode and stuff that doesn't work. So while we are, somewhat singing its praises, I do think the fair ranking is a lieutenant commander, which might come in, sort of lower than it sounds like how we're talking about it. But I think that's all about perspective. We went in expecting this to be terrible. And it is, I think, an above average episode. So yeah, lieutenant commander.
Yeah, I'm somewhere between the lieutenant and lieutenant commander with this, because, as I said, I didn't totally hate it, but I didn't think it was amazing either. I'm sort of a bit on the fence. I'm trying to think what the lowest rank. You see, I should have kept a note. I think I've given something a lieutenant junior grade before, haven't I?
I agree.
Yeah,
this season.
I might go. I think I'm going to go lieutenant. I'm going to go lieutenant. So just below the middle, I think, on this one. Because I still do have a hard time accepting it as hard Star Trek canon. But as an hour of entertaining television, I quite enjoyed it, like I said. So it's difficult. But yeah. As I said, I am surprised.
Yeah.
by this, because I was expecting to really dislike it. In fact, I was even saving the ensign rank for this episode. But you know what? We've still got 3 episodes left.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I've tried to avoid where they're going with this, but we'll see. But yeah. Anyway. If anybody's watching or listening out there, we'd like to know what you think. If you strongly disagree with us, please let us know. Again, I've avoided most of the reviews so far, so I don't know whether this is an episode people are applauding or maligning. I don't actually know.
I don't know. I will say the only thing I know is that a lot of my friends who are Star Trek nerds love Lower Decks. I absolutely love it.
Right.
And I know you and I are in the exact opposite camp. So, yeah, all I can think is that people loved it. But yeah.
Great.
Would love to hear your options, your opinion.
Okay. Well, maybe they should open a channel.
Okay. So if you are watching this on YouTube, please do check us out as a podcast. We're Let's See What's Out There podcast at LSWOT cast on all good social medias. Like, follow, subscribe, and send us your thoughts. LSWOTcast@gmail.com. Send us an email and let us know what you think. I've been Pete Mealy. You can find me at PMCMELE. Keith, where can people find more of you and your work?
Yeah, well, please check out some more of the work on the channel. We have reviews of various Star Trek movies and shows on physical media, as well as lots of other movies and TV shows. So please check that out. We also have streams like this where we talk about things such as Star Wars shows like The Mandalorian and Andor. So have a look at those also. If you want to see some of my more creative work, I've got another channel, British Isles, EYLES, as in my last name. And you can see some short films that I've made on there. So please do check that out. And I want to give a shout out to Neil Myers, who does the music for this show. Neil's work can be found at neilmyersmusic.com. So that just leaves me to thank you, Pete, and thank everybody for watching. I am now going to reward myself by, well, hopefully reward myself by watching episode 8, which I believe is called Under the Cloak of War. But that's all I know about it at the moment. I like the title, so we'll see. But yeah.
I hope you have a nice beverage to enjoy while you watch it.
Indeed. And we will see you next time on
Let's See What's Out There.
Bye for now.